The stars looked cold and distant through the bridge windows of the ESS Harmony as Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet grow larger on his screens. 37 enemy ships hung in space like dark shadows against the starfield, their weapons already powered and ready. Jake knew they had come here to die, but he also knew they had to try one more time. "Captain, we're receiving multiple targeting locks," said Commander Steve Parker from his station. His voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. They all knew what those locks meant. The Zephyrians had never shown mercy before. "Hold course," Jake ordered. "Keep broadcasting the peace signal on all frequencies." Ambassador Linda Hayes stood beside him, her diplomatic case clutched tightly in her hands. Inside were documents. That represented 3 years of careful preparation. Treaties, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, territorial compromises. Everything humanity could offer to avoid this war. "They have to listen this time," Linda said quietly. "We're offering them everything they asked for and more." Jake wanted to believe her, but he had seen too many burned colonies and too many refugee ships fleeing Zephyrian attacks. The alien alliance had been clear in their actions, even if they refused to speak. Humans were not welcome in their part of the galaxy. Dr. Amanda Collins looked up from her science station. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildup in there. Weapon systems. Whatever they're planning, it's going to be big." The Harmony was Earth's newest diplomatic vessel, built specifically for this mission. She carried no heavy weapons, only defensive shields and the most advanced communication equipment humanity could build. Her crew of 25 had all volunteered, knowing they might not return home. "Signal coming in from the lead Zephyrian ship," reported Communications Officer Katie Johnson. Her young face was pale but determined. "They're responding to our transmission." "Put it on speakers," Jake said. The bridge filled with harsh, clicking sounds as the alien language poured through the speakers. The universal translator worked for several seconds before producing words they could understand. "Human vessel. You have entered sacred space. Your species is a disease that spreads through the galaxy. There can be no peace between purity and plague. Prepare for cleansing." The transmission ended with a sharp click. Jake felt his heart sink, but he had expected this response. Still, they had to try everything. "Linda, you're on," he said. Ambassador Hayes moved to the communication station and activated the transmission array. Her voice carried across space to the alien fleet, steady and professional despite the circumstances. "This is Ambassador Linda Hayes of Earth, speaking for all of humanity. We have come in peace, as we have for 3 years. We do not seek conflict with your alliance or any of your member species. We offer withdrawal from all disputed territories, shared technology for mutual benefit, and cultural exchange to promote understanding between our peoples." She paused, looking at the datapad in her hands. "We have brought with us samples of human art, music, and literature. We want to show you who we really are. We are not the disease you believe us to be. We are explorers, dreamers, builders. We want to add our voice to the great choir of galactic civilization, not drown out others." Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez watched his instruments carefully. "Shields at full power, Captain. Engines ready for emergency burn, if needed." Jake nodded but kept his attention on the alien fleet. 37 ships against 1. If they wanted to run, now would be the time. But running would accomplish nothing. Earth needed to know that every option had been tried. "Continue the transmission, Linda," he said. The ambassador took a deep breath and continued. "We know there has been mistrust and fear. We know our rapid expansion has concerned many species. We are willing to impose strict limits on our colonization. We are willing to share our medical technology, our agricultural advances, our clean energy systems. We ask only for the chance to prove that cooperation benefits everyone. Dr. Collins suddenly looked up from her station, her face alarmed. "Captain, they're charging weapons. All ships are powering up their main guns." Jake felt time slow down around him. This was the moment he had hoped would never come, but had prepared for anyway. He activated the ship's internal communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for combat. Secure all stations and brace for impact. We're going to try to keep the communication array online as long as possible." Throughout the ship, the crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had drilled for this moment hundreds of times during the long journey from Earth. Everyone knew their job. Katie Johnson's hands flew over her controls. "I'm boosting signal strength and opening all backup channels. If we go down, at least, our message will reach every human ship in range." "Good thinking," Jake said. He turned back to Linda. "Keep talking. The longer we can delay them, the better." Linda's voice grew stronger as she continued the transmission. "We have children on our colonies who have never known war. We have scientists working to cure diseases that affect dozens of species. We have artists creating beautiful things just to share them with others. We are not your enemy unless you make us your enemy." The first energy blasts lit up space around the Harmony. The alien fleet had opened fire, but they were still at long range. Jake watched the tactical display as enemy projectiles and energy beams crossed the void toward them. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "Keep us between the fleet and Earth space as long as possible." The ship shuddered as the first hits struck their shields. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as power systems strained to absorb the incoming fire. "Shields down to 80%, Bobby reported. "We can take maybe 10 more hits like that." Linda kept broadcasting even as the ship shook around her. "This does not have to happen. We can still choose peace. We can still choose to build something better together rather than tear each other apart." More weapons fire streaked through space. The Zephyrians were getting closer, and their aim was improving. Jake realized they had maybe minutes before the Harmony was destroyed. "Steve, get me a direct line to Earth Command," he ordered. "Priority Alpha Channel." "Channel open, Captain," Steve replied. Doc Jake took the microphone and made the call he had hoped never to make. "Earth Command, this is Captain Morrison aboard the Harmony. The peace mission has failed. The Zephyrians have rejected all offers and are firing on us. We are transmitting all diplomatic records now. Tell Command to implement Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was the code for total war preparation. Jake had hoped those words would never leave his lips. The ship lurched violently as multiple hits struck the hull. Emergency klaxons wailed as atmosphere began venting from several sections. "Hull breaches on decks 3 and 5, Bobby shouted over the noise. "We're losing life support fast." Dr. Collins abandoned her science station and grabbed an emergency kit. "I'm going to help with damage control." Jake watched her go, knowing she was probably heading toward her death. But that was what they had all signed up for. Sometimes someone had to stand between evil and innocent people, even if it cost everything. "Linda, wrap it up," he said. "We need to get our final message out." Ambassador Hayes looked at him with tears in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Zephyrian Alliance, we came to you with open hands and open hearts. We offered you everything we could give. You have chosen to answer with violence. This choice will have consequences that you cannot imagine. We could have been friends. Instead, you have made us something else entirely." The transmission ended just as another massive blast tore through the Harmony's remaining shields. Jake knew they were out of time. But humanity would remember this moment, and humanity would not forget who was responsible. The last thing he saw before the bridge exploded around them was the cold light of distant stars, waiting to witness what would come next. The bridge of the ES Harmony was dying around Captain Jake Morrison. Sparks flew from broken control panels while emergency lights cast strange shadows through the smoke. Half his crew was already dead, and the other half would join them soon. But Jake had one last job to do. "Katie, is the communications array still working?" He shouted over the sound of buckling metal and escaping air dock communications. Officer Katie Johnson crawled across the tilted floor toward her station. Blood ran down her face from a head wound, but her hands were steady as she checked her equipment. "Main transmitter is damaged, but I can patch through the backup system. We'll have maybe 2 minutes before the power dies completely." "Ambassador." Linda Hayes lay pinned under a fallen beam near the center of the bridge. Her legs were crushed, but her eyes were clear and focused. "Jake," she called weakly, "make them understand. Make them know what they've done." Jake stumbled toward the communication station, his own body screaming in pain from burns and cuts. Through the cracked view screen, he could see the Zephian fleet moving closer, their weapons still firing at the broken human ship. They wanted to make sure nothing survived. "Captain," Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez called from across the bridge. "I can give you full power to the transmitter, but it'll drain our life support completely. We'll have maybe 5 minutes of air left after that." "Do it," Jake ordered without hesitation. "This message has to reach every human ship, every colony, every listening post in our space." Bobby's hands worked quickly over his damaged controls. Throughout the dying ship, the last of their power flowed into the communication array. Jake felt the artificial gravity fluctuate as non-essential systems shut down one by one. Katie looked up from her station. "We're online, Captain, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Every human ship within 50 light years will hear this." Jake took the microphone with hands that shook from more than just his injuries. Behind him, the sounds of his dying crew filled the bridge. These were good people who had volunteered for a mission they knew might be their last. They deserved to have their sacrifice mean something. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Harmony," he began, his voice carrying across the void to human ears throughout the galaxy. "I'm transmitting this message from a ship that is about to die, killed by beings who claim to represent galactic civilization." Linda Hayes managed to raise herself slightly despite her injuries. "Tell them about the offers we made," she whispered. "Tell them we tried everything." Jake nodded and continued speaking into the microphone. "For 3 years, humanity has tried to make peace with the Zephyrian Alliance. We offered to withdraw from disputed territories. We offered to share our technology, our medicine, our knowledge. We offered to limit our expansion and respect their boundaries. We came here today with treaties that would have given them everything they said they wanted." Through the damaged view screen, Jake could see enemy fighters circling the Harmony like vultures. They were taking their time, enjoying the hunt. That told him everything he needed to know about the kind of beings they were dealing with. "They answered our offers with weapons fire," Jake continued, his voice growing harder. "They called us a disease. They said there could be no peace between their purity and our plague. These are the words of beings who see genocide as a reasonable solution to political disagreement." Dr. Amanda Collins crawled toward them across the debris-covered floor. She was badly hurt, but she carried a datapad with her. "Captain, I managed to record everything. The sensor data, their weapon signatures, their tactical formations. If this data reaches Earth, our military will know exactly what they're up against." Jake took the datapad and connected it to the communication system. "Broadcasting tactical data now," he announced. "Every scan, every weapon reading, everything we learned about their capabilities, use it well." The ship shuddered again as more enemy fire struck the hull. Warning lights flashed as life support systems began failing one by one. Jake could feel the air getting thinner with each breath. "Steve, are you still with us?" Jake called to his first officer. Commander Steve Parker pulled himself up from behind an overturned chair. His uniform was torn and bloody, but he was alive. "Still here, Captain." "What do you need? Help me finish this message." "Earth needs to Understand what's coming. Steve made his way to the communication station and stood beside his captain. Together, they faced the microphone that would carry their final words across human space. Jake's voice filled the communication channels once more. We came in peace, but you mistake our desire for harmony as weakness. You see our restraint as cowardice. You believe our compassion makes us vulnerable. This is your gravest error. Behind them, Katie Johnson worked frantically to keep the signal strong as power systems failed throughout the ship. Signal is still clear, Captain. They're hearing every word. Linda Hayes spoke from where she lay trapped. Her voice was weak, but determined. Tell them about the children, Jake. Tell them about the colonies they've already destroyed. Jake felt anger building in his chest as he thought about the refugee ships he had seen, packed with survivors from worlds the Zephyrians had burned. Families torn apart, children orphaned, entire communities wiped out by beings who claimed to represent civilization. The Zephyrians have already murdered thousands of innocent people, he said into the microphone. They have destroyed peaceful colonies whose only crime was existing in space they wanted for themselves. They have shown no mercy to our civilians, no respect for our attempts at diplomacy, no willingness to find solutions that don't involve mass killing. The bridge lights flickered and died, leaving only the glow from the communication equipment. Jake could hear the sound of the hull cracking under the continued enemy bombardment. They were running out of time. If this is how you respond to peace, Jake said, his voice carrying a promise that would echo through history, then you will learn why humanity survived the ice ages. You will learn why we climbed from caves to stars. You will learn why every predator on our world learned to fear us. Steve Parker leaned closer to the microphone. They think they know what humans are because they've seen our diplomats and our explorers. They have no idea what we become when someone threatens our families. Jake nodded and continued the transmission that would change everything. You wanted war instead of peace. You chose destruction instead of cooperation. Very well, you shall have exactly what you asked for. Through the broken view screen, Jake could see the lead Zephyrian ship moving closer. Its captain probably wanted to watch the human vessel die up close. That arrogance would cost them dearly in the months to come. To every human listening to this transmission, Jake said, his voice growing stronger despite his injuries, remember that we tried. Remember that we offered them everything reasonable beings could want. Remember that they chose to answer with murder. Katie looked up from her controls. Captain, we're losing the signal. Maybe 30 seconds left. Jake knew this was his last chance to send the message that needed to be heard. He thought about his own family back on Earth, about all the families throughout human space who would soon face the same choice his crew had faced. Humanity has been peaceful because we chose to be peaceful, he said into the dying transmission. We have been restrained because we chose to be restrained. But when someone threatens everything we love and rejects every reasonable offer we make, we become something else entirely. The ship lurched violently as a direct hit breached the main hull. Jake could feel the vacuum of space pulling at the atmosphere around them. This was the end. They will learn what happens when you back a thinking species into a corner, Jake said, his final words carrying across the galaxy. They will learn what humans become when we stop trying to be civilized. And when they do, they will regret choosing war over peace. The transmission cut off as the East Harmony exploded in a brief flash of light against the stars. But the message had been sent, and across human space, millions of people heard those final words and understood that everything was about to change. The message reached Mars first. Admiral Ryan Brooks was in the middle of a routine defense meeting when his aide burst through the door with a face as pale as ice. The recording of Captain Morrison's final transmission played through the speakers of the war room, and every officer present felt the same cold fury building in their chest. How long ago? Brooks asked when the transmission ended. 18 hours, sir. The signal has been confirmed by 3 separate listening posts. The Harmony is gone, and all 25 crew members are dead. Brooks stood up slowly from his chair. He was a career military man who had spent 40 years preparing for battles he hoped would never come. Now those battles were here, and they would be unlike anything humanity had ever fought. "Activate Project Prometheus immediately," he ordered. "Full authorization, all security levels. I want every classified weapon system, every experimental ship design, every piece of military technology we've been keeping locked away. Bring it all online now." On Luna Base, General Patricia White received the transmission while reviewing colony evacuation plans. She had been preparing for this possibility for months, ever since the first Zephyrian attacks on the Outer Rim colonies. But hearing Jake Morrison's final words made everything terrifyingly real. "Get me President Davis on the secure line," she told her staff, "and patch me through to every fleet commander in human space. We have maybe days before they follow up their attack on the Harmony with something bigger." The call to Earth took only minutes. President Charles Davis listened to the recording in his office while his security advisor stood nearby. When it finished, the room was completely silent for nearly a minute. "How many ships do we have?" Davis asked finally. "Counting everything." "From battleships to patrol boats, maybe 300 vessels," replied Defense Secretary Gary Collins. "But most of them are exploration ships or cargo haulers. We only have about 50 true warships." Davis nodded grimly. "And how many do the Zephyrians have?" Intelligence estimates put their total fleet at over 2,000 ships, spread across 12 species. "They've been building for war for decades while we've been building for exploration." The president walked to his window and looked out at the blue sky of Earth. Somewhere out there, beyond the atmosphere and the protection of the Sol defense grid, an enemy was coming that wanted to wipe out every human in the galaxy. "Then we'll have to build more ships," Davis said simply. "How long would it take to convert our civilian shipyards for military production?" Defense Secretary Collins checked his notes. "With emergency powers, maybe 6 months to full conversion." "But sir, even then we're talking about facing an enemy with 4 times our numbers and centuries more experience in warfare." Davis turned back to face the room. "Gary, you're thinking like this is a normal war between normal species." But Jake Morrison was right about one thing. They have no idea what humans become when someone threatens everything we love. Within hours, the last transmission was broadcasting on every human world. Colony governors listened with growing anger as they realized their peaceful overtures had been answered with murder. On factory worlds, workers heard the message and began volunteering for overtime shifts to produce weapons and ship components. Dr. William Ross sat in his laboratory deep beneath the Colorado mountains, listening to the transmission for the 5th time. Around him, weapons that had been locked away for decades were being unsealed and prepared for production. Devices that peaceful humanity had considered too dangerous to build were suddenly being rushed into assembly. "How long since we tested the neural enhancement series?" he asked his assistant. 15 years, sir." The Senate banned further development after the ethical review. Ross pulled up classified files on his computer screen. "Well, the Senate isn't going to be making those decisions anymore. Get me volunteers from the Colonial Marines. We're going to need soldiers who can think faster and react quicker than any enemy expects." On the frontier worlds, the evacuation orders came through official channels, but many colonists were already making their own preparations. Commander Lisa Carter stood in the town square of New Houston Colony, addressing a crowd of farmers and miners who had come to hear her speak. "The government is offering transport back to the inner worlds," she told them. "You'll be safe there while the military handles this threat, but I won't lie to you. Some of you are thinking about staying to fight, and if you do, you need to understand what that means." An old miner named Pete Johnson stepped forward from the crowd. "Commander, This is our home. We built it with our own hands from nothing but rock and dirt. Are we supposed to just hand it over to aliens who think we're a disease? Lisa looked at the faces around her. These were tough people who had survived on worlds that tried to kill them every day. They weren't soldiers, but they had something. That might be even more valuable. They had something to fight for. If you stay, she said, then we fight smart. We make them pay for every building, every street, every inch of ground. We show them that humans don't die easy, and we don't die quiet. Back on Earth, the shipyards that had been building exploration vessels and cargo haulers were rapidly converting to military production. The designs coming off the drawing boards had names like Vengeance, Retribution, and Fury. These were not ships built for discovery or trade. They were built for war. Captain Neil Turner supervised the construction of his new command, a destroyer called Wrath. The ship was half the size of the old diplomatic vessels, but carried 3 times the firepower. Every system was designed for one purpose: to hurt the enemy as badly as possible before going down. How long until she's ready? Turner asked the chief engineer overseeing construction. 2 months if we work around the clock. But sir, we're building her with experimental technology. Some of these systems have never been tested in real combat. Turner looked at the half-built ship through the construction bay windows. Then we'll test them on the Zephyrians. They wanted to see what humans are capable of. Let's show them. The transformation of human society was happening at every level. Universities that had focused on peaceful research were suddenly developing new weapons technologies. Medical schools were training combat medics alongside regular doctors. Even children in schools were learning about the galaxy's political situation and why their peaceful neighbors had chosen violence over cooperation. Intelligence reports began flooding in from deep space monitoring stations. The Zephyrian alliance was indeed massing for a major offensive. Hundreds of ships were moving toward human space, and their communications indicated they expected this to be a quick extermination campaign. Dr. Amanda Collins, somehow she had survived the destruction of the Harmony and been rescued by a patrol ship, briefed Earth Command on what she had learned about Zephyrian capabilities. Her data from the final moments of the diplomatic mission proved invaluable for understanding enemy weapons and tactics. They fight like they're hunting animals, she explained to a room full of military officers. They expect their enemies to run or surrender when faced with superior numbers. They've never fought anyone who fights back harder when cornered. Admiral Brooks studied the tactical displays showing enemy fleet movements. How long do we have? Based on their current speed and direction, maybe 4 months before they reach our outer colonies. 6 months before they threaten the core worlds. Brooks nodded. Then we have 6 months to become something they're not expecting. 6 months to turn a peaceful species into the thing that wins this war. Throughout human space, the preparations continued day and night. Factories worked triple shifts. Volunteers lined up at recruitment centers. Scientists who had spent their careers helping people suddenly found themselves designing ways to hurt enemies. The message from Jake Morrison's final transmission played constantly on news broadcasts and military channels. His words had become more than just a warning. They had become a promise that humanity intended to keep, and in the depths of space, monitoring stations began detecting something the Zephyrians had not expected. Human ships were moving too, but not in retreat. They were taking positions for battles that would determine the future of the galaxy. 6 months after the last transmission, humanity struck back. The target was the Zephyrian outpost at Kepler 442b, a mining station where the aliens had been using human prisoners as slave labor. Admiral Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of his flagship, the ESS Retribution, watching as his strike force dropped out of hyperspace. 12 ships confirmed, Admiral, reported his tactical officer. All systems green and ready for combat. Brooks looked at the tactical display showing the Enemy station. Intelligence reports said over 300 human prisoners were being held there, forced to work in the mines until they died of exhaustion. The Zephyrians had made it clear they saw humans as nothing more than useful animals. All ships, this is Admiral Brooks. Today we show them what happens when you cage a human being. Today we show them what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. Begin the attack. The human fleet moved forward in a formation that would have seemed impossible to the old exploration crews. These were warships built for battle, crewed by people who had heard Jake Morrison's final words and understood what they meant. Captain Neil Turner's destroyer Wrath led the charge, her weapons already powering up. The Zephyrian defense fleet was caught completely off guard. They had 8 warships protecting the station, more than enough to handle any normal attack. But they were not prepared for the fury that human ships brought to battle. Enemy ships moving to intercept, Turner reported over the communication channel. They're forming a standard defensive line. Then let's show them why standard tactics don't work against humans, Brooks replied. Execute Plan Hammer. The human ships suddenly changed formation, moving in patterns that seemed to violate basic military doctrine. Instead of maintaining safe distances and exchanging fire, they drove straight into the enemy formation at maximum speed. The Zephyrians had never seen anything like it. Captain Sarah Walsh commanded the cruiser Fury, and she brought her ship so close to an enemy vessel that their shields actually touched. At point-blank range, her weapons tore through the alien ship's defenses like paper. The Zephyrian captain probably never understood what hit him. Target destroyed, Walsh reported calmly, moving to engage the next enemy ship. The battle was over in less than 20 minutes. 8 Zephyrian ships destroyed, the station's defenses eliminated, and the human fleet barely scratched. But the real victory was what they found on the station itself. Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Mills led the Marine assault team through the station's corridors. Her soldiers moved with the enhanced reflexes and improved strength that Dr. Ross's neural enhancement program had given them. They were faster, stronger, and more coordinated than any enemy expected. Prisoner compound located, Mills reported over her communication system. Beginning extraction operations. The Marines found the human prisoners in conditions that made hardened soldiers angry enough to see red. Men, women, and even children who had been worked nearly to death, fed barely enough to survive, treated like animals by their captors. Dr. Kevin Clark, the fleet's chief medical officer, began treating the rescued prisoners immediately. Most of them are suffering from malnutrition and exhaustion, he reported. But they're alive and they're talking. The intelligence they can provide will be invaluable. One of the prisoners, a mining engineer named Tom Bradley, grabbed Dr. Clark's arm as he was being treated. Doctor, you have to understand. They're not just cruel, they enjoy it. They take pleasure in watching us suffer. Those words went into the official reports that were sent back to Earth Command. The Zephyrians were not just enemies. They were sadists who saw torture as entertainment. Any remaining doubts about the righteousness of this war disappeared when those reports were read. The rescued prisoners also provided crucial intelligence about Zephyrian military capabilities. The aliens had been careless around people they considered animals, discussing battle plans and ship movements where humans could overhear. They're planning a major offensive, reported former prisoner Lisa Martinez, who had been a communications specialist before her capture. I heard them talking about a 1,000-ship fleet that's moving toward the core human worlds. Admiral Brooks studied the intelligence reports while his fleet prepared to depart. The rescue mission had been a complete success, but it was just the beginning. The Zephyrians would respond to this attack, and when they did, humanity would. Be ready, all ships, prepare for hyperspace jump, Brooks ordered. We're going home to prepare for the next phase. News of the victory spread through human space faster than the ships that had won it. For the first time since the last transmission, humans had something to celebrate. The species that had claimed to be superior had been defeated by the animals. They had tried to enslave. On Earth, President Davis addressed the planet and all human colonies. Today, our military forces struck back at the enemies who murdered our diplomats and enslaved our people. The Battle of Kepler 442b was a complete victory. 8 enemy ships destroyed, over 300 of our people rescued, and valuable intelligence gathered about enemy capabilities. The president's voice grew harder as he continued. But this is just the beginning. The Zephyrians are massing a fleet of over 1,000 ships for an attack on our core worlds. They believe they can finish what they started when they destroyed. The Harmony, they are wrong. In the shipyards of Mars and Luna, construction crews worked around the clock to complete the new warships. The victory at Kepler 442b had proven that human tactics and technology could defeat the Zephyrians, but they would need many more ships for the battles to come. Captain Danny Rodriguez was assigned to command one of the new vessels, a fast attack ship called Vengeance. The ship was smaller than a traditional cruiser, but packed with experimental weapons and stealth technology. It was designed to hit hard and disappear before the enemy could respond. How many ships like this are we building? Rodriguez asked the shipyard supervisor. 50 of the Vengeance class, plus 200 of the standard destroyers and 30 heavy cruisers. It's the largest military buildup in human history. Rodriguez looked at his new command through the construction bay windows. The ship was beautiful in a deadly way, all sharp angles and hidden weapons. It looked like what it was, a predator built for hunting. The rescued prisoners from Kepler 442b were debriefed extensively by intelligence officers. Their stories of Zephyrian cruelty were documented and distributed to military units throughout human space. Every soldier needed to understand exactly what kind of enemy they were fighting. "They don't see us as people," explained former prisoner Mike Chun during his debriefing. "To them, we're just smart animals that can be useful for a while before we're disposed of. They were planning to work us to death and then use our bodies as fertilizer for their food crops." The intelligence reports also revealed the Zephyrian command structure and their plans for the coming offensive. The aliens expected to crush human resistance with overwhelming numbers, then occupy the core worlds and use the surviving humans as slave labor. "They're confident," reported Intelligence Director Carol Thompson. "Maybe too confident. They think the Battle of Kepler 442b was just a lucky strike by desperate humans. They have no idea what's actually coming for them." General Patricia White studied the tactical projections on her command screen. The Zephyrian fleet was indeed massive, but it was also predictable. They fought using standard formations and tactics that had worked against other species. They had never faced an enemy that adapted and improvised the way humans did. "They're going to attack the Vega system first," White told her staff. "It's the gateway to our core worlds, and they need to control it before they can move deeper into human space. We'll let them come, and then we'll show them what humans have learned about warfare." The trap was being set. Humanity had transformed itself from a peaceful species into something the galaxy had never seen before, a military force that fought not just to win, but to make their enemies regret ever threatening them. And somewhere in deep space, the Zephyrian fleet continued its advance toward human worlds, unaware that they were sailing toward their own destruction. 2 years after Jake Morrison's last transmission, the galaxy was a different place. The war that was supposed to end humanity in weeks had instead torn apart the Zephyrian alliance and changed the balance of power among the stars. Admiral Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the enemy fleet approached Vega Prime for what everyone knew would be the final battle. "Admiral, we're detecting over 800 Zephyrian ships," reported his tactical officer. "They've brought everything they have left." Brooks nodded calmly. The human fleet defending Vega Prime numbered only 300 ships, but those ships carried crews that had learned to fight like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. More importantly, they carried the memory of every human colony that had been destroyed and every prisoner who had died in alien camps. "General White, are your ground forces ready?" Brooks asked over the communication channel. "Ready and waiting," came the reply from the planet's surface. "If any of them make it past your fleet, we'll be here to greet them." The Zephyrian fleet commander sent a surrender demand as his ships moved into attack formation. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, intended to terrify the humans into submission. "Human forces, this is Supreme War Leader Zektar of the Zephyrian Alliance. You are outnumbered and surrounded. Surrender now and some of your species may be allowed to serve as slaves. Continue to resist and every human in the galaxy will die." Brooks activated his own communication system and sent a reply that would be recorded and remembered throughout galactic history. "Supreme War Leader, this is Admiral Brooks of the Human Defense Fleet. 2 years ago, you murdered our diplomats. When they came to you in peace, you called us animals and said we were a disease to be cleansed. Today you will learn what happens when animals decide to bite back." The battle began with the largest space engagement in galactic history. 800 alien ships against 300 human vessels, fighting in the space around a world that had become a symbol of human determination. But numbers alone would not decide this fight. Captain Neil Turner's destroyer Wrath led the first attack, driving straight into the center of the enemy formation. Behind him came 50 other ships, all moving with the aggressive tactics that had become the human signature. They didn't fight to survive, they fought to win. "All ships, execute plan devastation," Brooks ordered. The human fleet split into multiple groups, each one attacking a different part of the Zephyrian formation. But instead of the careful defensive tactics the aliens expected, the humans drove forward with suicidal courage, bringing their ships so close that shield generators overloaded. From proximity, Captain Sarah Walsh brought her cruiser Fury alongside a Zephyrian battleship 3 times her size. At point-blank range, her experimental weapons tore through the enemy's heavy armor like it was made of paper. The alien ship exploded in a flash of light that lit up half the battlefield. "Target destroyed," Walsh reported. Engaging the next. 1. The enhanced human crews moved faster than their enemies could follow. Neural improvements allowed them to process information and react to threats in milliseconds. What looked like chaos to the Zephyrians was actually a carefully coordinated dance of destruction. Captain Danny Rodriguez piloted his attack ship Vengeance through the enemy formation like a ghost. His stealth systems made him nearly invisible. Until the moment he struck, Zephyrian ships exploded without warning as Rodriguez and his squadron hit vital systems and disappeared again. "This is impossible," transmitted one alien commander before his ship was destroyed. "How can animals fight like this?" The answer came from 2 years of preparation and the driving fury of a species that had been pushed too far. Every human in the fleet remembered Jake Morrison's final words. Every human remembered the colonies that had been burned and the prisoners who had been enslaved. But the real shock for the Zephyrians came when their fleet commander was captured alive. Captain Michelle Taylor led a boarding party that cut through the enemy flagship's defenses and took the bridge in less than 10 minutes. When Supreme War Leader Zektar was brought before Admiral Brooks, the alien's first words changed everything. "I request terms of surrender," the Supreme War Leader said through the translation system. Brooks stared at the being that had ordered the murder of human diplomats and the enslavement of human colonists. This creature had expected to crush humanity like an insect, but instead found himself begging for mercy. "Terms?" Brooks replied. "You want to discuss terms after you rejected every reasonable offer we made? After you called us animals and said we were a disease?" The alien's confidence was completely gone. "Your species fights in ways we do not understand. You sacrifice yourselves for tactical advantage. You show no fear of death. We cannot defeat beings who fight like this." Brooks activated the fleet communication system so every human ship could hear what came next. 2 years ago, Captain Morrison told you that you would regret choosing war over peace. He was right. Your alliance is broken. Your fleets are destroyed. Your member species are in rebellion against your leadership. You wanted to see what humans become when pushed to war. Now you know. The Battle of Vega Prime lasted 3 days. But the outcome was decided in the first few hours. The Zephyrian fleet was not just defeated. It was annihilated. Of 800 ships that had come to destroy humanity's core worlds, fewer than 50 escaped to carry word of the disaster back to alien space. But the military victory was only part of the story. Throughout the galaxy, news of the human triumph spread like wildfire. Species that had been conquered by the Zephyrians began to rise in rebellion. The alliance that had seemed invincible was falling apart as its subject races realized that the masters could be beaten. Dr. Kevin Clark, now serving as the fleet's intelligence coordinator, compiled reports from across known space. Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 12 different species. The Zephyrian alliance is collapsing faster than our most optimistic projections. The transformation of the galaxy's political structure happened with stunning speed. Within months, the Confederation that had dominated dozens of star systems was reduced to a handful of core worlds. Former slave races declared independence and sent ambassadors to Earth, seeking alliance with the species that had broken their chains. President Charles Davis addressed the galaxy from Earth, his words broadcast to every inhabited world within 1,000 light years. The war that began with the murder of our peaceful ambassadors is now over. The Zephyrian alliance has been defeated, not because humanity sought conquest, but because we refused to accept extinction. We offered peace and were answered with violence. We offered cooperation and were met with cruelty. But we never forgot who we were or what we stood for. The President's voice carried across space to ears both human and alien. Today, we extend the same offer we made 2 years ago to any species willing to accept it. Join us in building a galaxy where different peoples can coexist, where conflicts are resolved through negotiation rather than warfare, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. 1 year later, Admiral Brooks stood on the Weka bridge of the ESS New Harmony, the flagship of humanity's peacekeeping fleet. The ship carried the same name as the vessel that had been destroyed carrying Jake Morrison's final diplomatic mission. But this was a different kind of ship entirely. Instead of carrying offers of surrender, the New Harmony carried offers of protection to worlds that had been freed from Zephyrian control. Instead of diplomatic documents, it carried food and medical supplies for refugees from the war zones. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Andromedan Republic, reported his communication officer. They're requesting Earth's assistance in mediating a territorial dispute with the Centauri Federation. Brooks smiled as he authorized the response. This was what humanity had always wanted. Not to be the galaxy's conquerors, but to be its peacekeepers. Not to rule through fear, but to lead through example. The last transmission from Earth had promised that those who chose war over peace would regret their decision. That promise had been kept. But more importantly, it had led to something better. A galaxy where Jake Morrison's dream of peaceful cooperation might finally become reality. In the depths of space, monitoring stations that had once watched for enemy fleets now tracked supply convoys carrying aid to recovering worlds. The species that had been forced to become warriors were now free to return to being explorers, teachers, and builders. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons or its tactics, but its refusal to abandon hope, even in the darkest times. And in that lesson, perhaps everyone had found something worth fighting for.